Well, with the world feeling potentially a little topsy-turvy or just looking perfectly right, like all the stars have aligned depending on where you're coming from. There's been an election, someone got elected, and things are going to change. Or they might not. I'm just one of those people that always ends up being a little bit on the skeptical side. I can't help it. But now this time has brought a lot of people to now be thinking about moving to another part of the world, getting to the point where they have thought, oh my goodness, the person got elected and I can't stand this person, and so on and so forth, whoever. Did I record this before the election? Maybe. Okay, I didn't record this before the election, but the thing is, regardless, I would say almost the same things, regardless of who would be in office in the US. I'm Rafael Di Furia. Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and roll that intro. This video is not in support of one candidate or the other candidate. This is not promoting a particular party or their ideals. I'm one of those people that just happens to be unhappy across the board, but this is some of my takes as somebody who lives abroad. And in the years that I've lived abroad, there have been elections. Shocking, I know. Being abroad for more than 16 years, it's bound to happen at some point. But I can say I always hear the same thing, even when I lived in the States. And I've said this before in episodes. Oh, if my person doesn't get in office, then oh my gosh, we're going to have to leave the country. This is the end of the world. We're moving to Canada. Get me out of here. Whenever I hear the whole, oh my gosh, we're going to have to move to Canada argument, I think this person is very likely not going to move to Canada. It's not exactly like, oh, I can just arrive and make my way there. But seriously speaking, there are some things that now, as an American citizen who's living outside of the US, there are going to be considerations that you want to think about. In reality, what's going to change for you? Probably not much. And like I said, I'm one of those people that remain skeptical, and even actually, but maybe what was it, a few weeks ago or a month ago, President-elect or former President Donald Trump actually said that he was going to get rid of double taxation for Americans residing abroad. Like I said, I have my skepticism, but this is something that I do find very interesting. For Americans living outside of the US, this is something that can be actually quite annoying, but I'm curious to see if this happens, and if it does happen, how is this going to be implemented? Because there are certain things that don't make sense, that don't fit necessarily the MO, because there's this, of course, America First mentality, putting tariffs on foreign imports and all of these things. So I'm not sure that I necessarily am confident that this is something that would be on its way out. And if it would be, it might not be so soon. However, this is maybe the highest level politician that I've ever heard talk about this particular topic. There have been random senators that have brought up the topic of getting rid of double taxation over the years, but it's one of those things that always just fades and falls off to the side. People forget about it. But it was very interesting to me that this was brought up specifically during an election season. And before the election, of course, this was something that perked my ears up and made me wonder what was going to happen. But again, I'm not saying that I'm in support or against any particular candidate or even the president-elect. I'm somebody who doesn't even get involved in American politics. I've lived abroad for a long time, and I'm not interested in participating in that system. But I'm not against those Americans who live abroad who do want to participate in that. It's not just a right, but some people view it as a duty. But for me personally, it's just something that I don't feel the need to be involved in. I don't necessarily see that my vote is going to make the difference one way or the other. And the person who got into office was exactly who I thought was going to get in office. Again, this isn't in support of or against the future president, former president, the guy who got elected, Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, whatever. The thing is, looking at it from a practical perspective, what's happened is happened. People have made their votes count, their voices heard, and now things are moving in a direction. And things I think have actually been moving in a very particular direction across the world, not just in the US, but just kind of in general. There are certain leanings more in a particular political direction, a little bit more towards the right. And this is one factor that I think a lot of people might want to take into consideration if they're thinking about moving abroad. If you're going to be moving abroad just simply because of the next president, why are you making a life-changing decision for something that's going to only be for the next 4 years? He can't get reelected again. He's already been president once. It's said and done. So realistically, as an American living abroad, there's not going to be that much that will change. However, there's a very important detail that I think a lot of people overlook. A lot of people who live in the US and see Americans voting from abroad say, well, why should they be allowed to vote? Why do they get a say in what's happening here? They left. They jumped ship. Why should they be able to say what's happening for us? The thing is, I think when it comes down to it, it's actually just as important for an American living abroad as it is for an American who's living inside of the country. And in some ways, actually, there will be things that will affect an American outside of the US much more than it would affect an American inside of the US. Granted, there are going to be many more things which would affect Americans inside the US way more. That's a whole different topic. But what I'm getting at is, on an international basis, if there are going to be international relations that are positive between two countries, that could affect how an individual just living their life might interact with others and how they will be treated, and even their ability to remain in a particular country. I mean, say, for example, if someone is from one country and they're going to another country, and then all of a sudden these countries are at war with each other, then maybe these respective nationalities aren't going to be welcome into the other's country or to get a visa into this country. Even I heard plenty of stories from Russians over the last few years and how it's become a little bit more difficult for them to get visas in certain parts of the world than it was previously, especially considering everything going on in that part of the world. Again, this is not pro or against any particular idea, regime, individual, leader, whatever. This is just talking about what we're seeing, what might be, what might not be. This is not a left versus right type video. This is just, what are we seeing now? What are the potential outcomes? I really don't care one way or the other, who leans where and what and how. I just care about what is A going to lead to B to C. What are the steps in front of us? And when it comes down to it, what are those steps in front of us? I don't think any of us know what's actually going to happen next. I hear people saying, oh my gosh, it's going to be World War 85 and we're going to go and this and that. And then I hear people on the other side saying, no, it's going to bring a time of peace and respect from all of these leaders around the world. And look at what happened last time and the different individuals and leaders that Trump interacted with when he was president before. And no, things are going to get good again. But I will say, for as many people that weren't fans of Donald Trump's outside of the US, there were also a lot of people who respected him, and most importantly, individuals who have their hands in control of large armies. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if two countries with large armies have the ability to have communication. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm old-fashioned and thinking that talking is a great way of resolving things, but again, that could just be me here. And on a completely separate topic, for those of you who've been wondering, yes, this microphone is definitely heavy. And the reason why it is not currently on a microphone arm stand is because the microphone stand that I've been using just recently died. I tried to lubricate it because it was making all these squeaking noises, but the lubricant actually made it work too well. And now it can no longer hold up the microphone. So I'm waiting for the replacement, and that should be here tomorrow morning. Well, after this video has been recorded, unfortunately. So in the meantime, I'm getting a good workout here. But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, I realize that there are a lot of you who watch these episodes and are subscribers of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and you are definitely not fans of Donald Trump. And then I also understand that there are a lot of you who actually are fans of Donald Trump. I respect both opinions. Everybody is entitled to believing what they want to believe and seeing things how they feel is right. So I'm not saying that anybody is right or anybody is wrong. I think there's a lot that's yet to be seen. I know there are a lot of individuals who have been very anti-Trump until this point. And again, I'm not pro or anti. I'm just curious about what's going to happen next. There's a lot that's left to be seen. But I might personally say that we are definitely at a time where things have the potential to get very spicy very quickly. And I am somebody who enjoys hot sauce. Not every hot sauce is going to burn your mouth. Some just have a great flavor. I will say I do have concerns what could be up next for citizens of the US who are living abroad, because, like I said before, the discussion was brought up about ending double taxation for Americans living abroad. But this makes me think, okay, if Americans living abroad are on his radar, what could come along with this? Because when you start jumping into one thing, it's very often that other topics get to be brought up at the same time. I mean, what is going to happen? There are certain things that can become quite annoying if you're an American living abroad. And there are many Americans who have decided that they would actually rather give up their citizenship. And there has been even the discussions in the past few years about what is happening with the cost of renunciation being more than $2,000 when it used to be $400. And then even before that, it used to actually even be free, if I'm not mistaken. And so now, supposedly, I haven't heard any updates. I don't know if there's been any updates, but there was a case against the Department of State or some U.S. agency saying that they frivolously increased the price and that this is unfair. And I would definitely say if somebody is thinking about renouncing their citizenship, that more than $2,000 is not a small sum of money. I mean, you really have to be in a position where you can just freely spend that. And especially when you compare the US to other countries that have no cost for renunciation, that you just simply go and you sign a paper, where with the US, if I'm not mistaken, the process might be something along the lines of you have a pre-interview and then potentially a second interview and maybe even another one after that, depending on what is necessary from you and depending on if they have questions. But we do have to think about what is happening. What are the next steps? I keep coming back to this point. I do see, like I was saying before, that there is a particular move in the direction of right around the world. And also definitely we've seen this represented in the last election in the US. And so even though I was joking about it before, about, oh my gosh, we have to leave, go to Canada, if you are seeing that the general direction of the country is something that you're not happy with, and that this direction going beyond the next 4 years is something that you would have a problem with, then that's something I would say is worth considering. But even if you are somebody who is happy with what is happening in America right now, and you're happy with the direction that things are going, there is also, I would say, a point to consider living abroad as well. And both kind of actually for the same reason. Many times I see individuals looking to live abroad and they're looking at a particular country and then they don't realize necessarily the kind of mentality towards things and how things work there. And they just look at the beauty and, oh my gosh, it's a fabulous foreign location. Oh, get me over there. I have to live there. And so what happens is then they get there and they see that maybe the local mentality and morals and ethics and ways of doing things don't exactly line up with their ways of seeing things. And maybe they even try to start to make changes that, oh, we have to take a stand, we have to push things in the direction. And then they don't realize that maybe it starts to become a little bit of why they started to leave their own country to begin with. My personal opinion, if you're moving to a foreign country, it's worthwhile taking it in for what it is. You're a guest in the country. Don't try to make the changes to make things like the country that you left. And there are individuals who I maybe see that are coming from a little bit more of a right-leaning direction, and they go to a country where things are a little bit more socialist, a little bit more left-leaning, and they see that the lifestyle and various things there are just not right for them. But then I see things happening the exact same way on the other side of the aisle with individuals who lean more left, and they go to a country that's maybe a little bit more on the traditional side, like say somewhere in Southern Europe, like for example, Portugal or Italy, and then they see that, well, maybe the lifestyle that they live or the way of being that they are is not accepted in the local culture. Even in the comment section of a recent episode, someone talked about being in a same-sex marriage and that they weren't accepted in Italy and that they had not great experience in Italy, but then they went to Portugal and then it actually ended up being better for them. But I have seen also for people in same-sex relationships in Portugal, I've seen things happening there too, more so in Spain and Italy than I would say in Portugal. But everywhere you go, you're going to have a different kind of approach. And if maybe you're leaning in a particular direction politically, how well does this location that you're moving to align with your beliefs, with your way of being? Because if you are going to arrive and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, wait, hold on, I just got to the end of the honeymoon period and now I'm seeing, wait, these people live this way. I could never live that way. Why would they ever dare to do that? They don't agree with me. They don't see things the way that I see. They are not good people. I mean, I've heard these people say these things before. I don't see them this way personally. I just want to make that really clear. And not necessarily verbatim, but you get the gist of it. But maybe you could end up in a more traditional country, but then you go to one of its bigger cities and things are maybe a little bit more open there. And things are a little bit more in the opposite direction than they are in other parts of the nation. I mean, just as an example, look at San Francisco and compare that to, like, I don't know, say Nampa, Idaho. Very different, very, very, very different bases there, and very different kind of direction for voting. And then also completely just lifestyle, completely different. Small city country living versus big city in California. I mean, definitely very different to begin with. But this is my point here, that you could find maybe a small city in a rural area and find something that's going to be a little bit more quote unquote traditional. And then maybe you go to a larger city and you're going to find something that's a little bit more out there and living in the modern age and open-minded to certain things. Then you have to take that into a balance. But I see a lot of people who maybe want to move to Italy are coming from a big city where things are leaning in a particular direction, and then they want to go to a smaller village where things are maybe leaning in the opposite direction, and then they see that it's not quite the right fit for them. But then the opposite can be true. Another example that I've mentioned a number of times over the years is that maybe someone comes from a small town in rural, I don't know, wherever, Kansas, and they're complaining about, oh, it's a small town and everybody's in everybody's business and people are closed-minded, it's a small town and blah, blah, blah. But then they decide that they want to move to a village in the middle of Germany. And I mean, at a certain point, you have to really take account of what you're looking into, because yes, there are going to be certain things that are really nice about moving to a small village in Europe, but there are going to be some similarities potentially to where it is that you might already be complaining about. Or maybe you're looking for certain things out of a small town, but they're just not compatible with your reality or your goals or whatever it is that you're hoping for from a particular place. I mean, it could be that you're looking to go to, I don't know, electronic music shows, and that you're interested in experimental visual arts and multimedia mixture of things. Then maybe you move to a small island that isn't well connected and maybe doesn't have these things. And even though you're looking for nice small village life, you don't get that other side that you find maybe in a little bit more of a metropolitan area. Maybe you could find it in a smaller city, but again, you really need to take account of what you are going to be able to find. And the reason why I'm talking about this in this episode is because when I hear individuals talking about moving abroad for politically motivated reasons, the majority of what I hear ends up not being in line with the locations that they are looking at and what they are wanting from them. And in many cases, like I've said many times over the past years, that a lot of individuals who I've interacted with, I'm not saying everybody, but the ones who I've interacted with, who move abroad purely for political reasons, not that it couldn't be something else. A lot of those moves that are purely politically motivated seem to be some of the most likely to have individuals moving back to the US. That's not necessarily a bad thing that somebody moves back to the US, but if someone is wanting to live the rest of their days in a country that sees things the way that they do, then if you're putting these things up on a pedestal, then you're not maybe going to be able to look at them in the most realistic way. Having a very realistic look is very important. And as I've said in so many episodes also, spending time in the location and really before you commit is really necessary. Even to rent in a particular location for like maybe 2 years or 3 years before you even purchase, it will save you so much time and headaches and potential even heartache with all of the things that you might have to deal with if you come to find that you've moved to a place that you're just not a fan of. Because also in some parts of the world, you'll find that real estate doesn't move at the same rate that it might in the US. And so the ability to just buy a home and then sell it, and especially if you're getting a mortgage and you're selling it very shortly after, I mean, you're going to be potentially losing a huge amount of money. I realize that spending money on a rental is maybe not the best option for a lot of people, but in the long run, I think it's actually a much more wise investment. But anyway, I'm Rafael Di Furia. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. And of course, a huge thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible on a monthly basis. It is because of you guys that this project is able to continue. And thank you to those of you who also take part in the conversation below these episodes. It is all very greatly appreciated. And thank you to those of you who also take part in the conversations as well in the comment section below here on YouTube. Of course, as always, this is an open conversation. And thank you to those of you who are subscribed to this channel as well as who like and share these with your friends. All of them push along the project in their own particular unique way. But of course, again, stay safe and healthy out there. I'm Rafael Di Furia, and I will see you all next time. Later.